The Call of Forgotten Shadows.
The silence that dominated the harbor was almost deafening as the ship continued to approach. There was no sound of creaking wood, nor of waves hitting the hull. Just the slow, ghostly movement of that ancient vessel, as if it were suspended between two worlds. The group of friends watched, frozen in place, as the air around them began to shift. A cold, salty breeze swept through, carrying with it a strange smell, of distant seas and something else, rotten. Sofia, the most sensitive of the group, felt a presence, as if invisible eyes were watching each of them. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the flashlight, which by now was flickering erratically, as though the electricity were struggling to stay alive. "Something's wrong with this," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the ship. Camila, always the leader, tried to stay calm. "This can't be real, it's just a legend." But even she knew those words no longer held any conviction. Suddenly, the ship stopped, almost touching the dock, without making a single sound. It seemed abandoned, but the sails, now more visible in the pale moonlight, were torn and soaked, as if they had spent centuries submerged in the depths. Javier, always the first to act, started walking toward the gangplank hanging from the side of the ship. "You're all scared of an old hunk of wood," he teased, forcing a nervous smile. The moment he stepped onto the plank, something in the air changed. A low, guttural sound echoed through the harbor, like a sigh rising from the depths. They all held their breath for a moment, trying to make sense of what they were hearing. It wasn't the sea, nor the wind, it sounded like distant voices, whispering in a forgotten language. Javier hesitated for a second, but stubbornly continued climbing the plank. And then they started to see the signs. First, there was a strange symbol carved into the side of the ship, a skull and crossbones emblem wrapped in chains, but different from any pirate flag they had ever seen. It was older, almost primitive, and it seemed to pulse with a menacing energy. The wood around the symbol was blackened, as if it had been burned long ago, and the chains and the carvings seemed to subtly move under the faint moonlight. "This is not good," Mateo said, stepping back a few paces. He was the most superstitious of the group, and everything in his gut was screaming for him to run. But it was too late to turn back. From within the ship, a thick mist began to spill out, slow and deadly, like a serpent uncoiling from the hull. It spread across the dock floor, enveloping their feet, bringing with it a cold so intense it hurt. The smell of ancient seas and decaying flesh grew stronger, almost unbearable. Camila looked around, trying to understand what was happening, and that's when she saw them, shadows. But these weren't just projections of light. They moved independently, sliding around them, taking shape. They were men. Or at least what was left of them. Pirates. Their tattered and rotting clothes hung on mutilated bodies, as though they had been dragged from a forgotten grave at the bottom of the sea. Their faces, disfigured by death, bore expressions of rage, as if they were still reliving the moment of their betrayal. The chains that bound them scraped the ground, clinking softly as they advanced. I think they know we're here," Sofia whispered, her voice nearly breaking with fear. The pirate shadows didn't attack. Not immediately. Instead, they circled the friends, like predators toying with their prey. Javier's flashlight, now on the ship's deck, flickered and then went out completely, leaving the group almost in total darkness. Mateo began to pray quietly, the terror building in his chest. But the prayers seemed useless against these entities. One of them, the tallest and most imposing, his face almost unrecognizable beneath a hood of shadows, stopped right in front of Camila. His eyes, burning with hatred, locked onto her, and for a second, she felt as though she was being pulled into a bottomless abyss. That's when she realized, this wasn't just a vision of disturbed spirits. They wanted something. They wanted revenge. And they had chosen these friends to pay the price.